Hello everyone, and welcome into School Talk here on July 29th with a socially distanced production from the WJHI studios. I am Clay Abels, welcoming in today our Superintendent of Greater Clark County Schools, Mr. Mark Laughner. How are we doing today, sir?
Doing great. Thank you for having me again.
We also have a special guest we'll get with you today, Ms. Lily Fondrisi from the WJHI program, but we're going to start off with Mr. Laughner as we are now into our second day of school here. I want to go back to a little bit on what we touched on before. A big topic for everybody is opening day with COVID protocol, mask policy. Let's start with there. What are the opening info as of today, July 29th, for COVID protocol and masks, not only in school but in transportation with buses?
Yeah, a lot of the protocols are staying the same. As far as buses, students are required to wear a mask. As far as in school, we're going to stay with the strongly recommended language. Obviously, that means a student or staff member has a choice on whether or not they wear a mask. We're going to continue to monitor this data, communicate with Dr. Yezel and the County Health Department. Parents need to understand that everything's subject to change. But as of right now, as we move forward, we're just going to strengthen the language a little bit and say that we are strongly recommending students and staff wear masks, but we're not mandating or requiring yet, and that's where we're at for now.
So I want to get to this. As we mentioned, we're on the second day of school here. Talk a little bit about the opening days of school. I know there's been changes. For parents, what do they need to pay attention to along with students when it comes to bus routes, coming in for opening day, getting your paperwork, everything lining up? What do parents and students need to pay attention for so everything can run smoothly and we can get into the rhythm of school?
Well, I think not just parents, but students, the district staff, the teachers, all need to just fall into a routine. And sometimes that's hard to fall into right away on the first day. Obviously, we've seen a little bit of that with transportation. We've had some issues to deal with this first couple of days of school that we're addressing through our transportation department. We apologize to any parent or student that has been inconvenienced or stressed because of maybe a bus wasn't there on time, or maybe they had to wait for an overflow bus to come to the school after school to get them to take them home, and got home a little late. We're correcting those issues. Our transportation department today is at several different schools addressing those students' needs, and we will address them. We'll get them rectified. Probably within 2 or 3 days we'll have them rectified and get everybody in a routine. But we do apologize. We want things to run smoothly, just like everyone else. We don't want a bunch of phone calls and emails because we would rather things run perfectly and smoothly the first day, but that's not always reality when you're dealing with a school district that has over 10,000 students. And frankly, one thing that we're dealing with is we have over 3,000 more students coming to school this year in person that came last year. And the other thing that also increased a few issues for us is the fact that here in Jeffersonville we went to a 2-tier bus route, so all secondary students had to have a new bus route designed. And so when you make a big change like that, there's going to be some things you have to work through. But I just want to make sure that all parents understand that we're working through these things, these issues, and we will address them and get them right.
From a parent and student standpoint, what can they do to help with the process in terms of knowing where to go and what to do? How can parents and students be helpful to you all as well in making it more efficient?
Well, communicate. I would hope that they would either reach out to transportation. If they can't get anyone at transportation, then they need to email or call the administration building. They can email me if they'd like, or my executive administrative assistant, Renee Markowski, and we'll make sure that we get their issue or their concern in the right hands to be dealt with. We want to problem solve with people and rectify issues immediately, and so really it's just about communication. I think sometimes in today's social media world, people are quick to just go to social media and complain instead of reaching out to the people that can solve their issue and solve their problem right away. And so I hope, moving forward, that they reach out to me, Ms. Markowski, someone at Transportation, Georgetta Thompson, Chad Shank, Jeff Brooks. Email them, call them, and we'll take care of the issue.
Now, before we get into the meat of the show, I know last time we talked, we said we wanted to look forward to the facility plan and talking more in detail with that. But before we do that, we want to look at having a voice to the community. And I know people have sent in questions before and comments online. We wanted to make sure everybody has a voice in this show. And so that's why today we brought in one of our students here at Jeffersonville High School, Miss Lily Fondrisi, who has a student-oriented question here on School Talk from Mr. Laughner. So I will give it over to Lily to ask her question to our superintendent.
So a lot of students this year are excited about the reopening of events, major ones like pep rallies, student sections, full capacity games, especially the senior class, because we've missed out on a lot of those opportunities through COVID. So a lot of us just want to know what your plan is this year for those types of events, especially in regards to sports.
Yeah, right now we have no restrictions, and we hope that it stays that way throughout the year. Now obviously there's some social distancing things that we have to monitor and take care of, in some of those events, and how do you do that? But we know at the administration building that those events are integral pieces of a student's experience at the high school level. And we want to try to make sure that we have those events for our students. We're going to try to find a way to do that. Obviously, if the health department steps in and says, hey, you need to pull back on some of that, then we will. But our goal is to try to make sure that all of our high school students have that experience.
Thank you. I'll hand it back to you, Clay.
That's Lily Fondrisi with our student-oriented question here on School Talk. More of those to come throughout the year as we continue with School Talk and our socially distanced production here with our superintendent, Mark Laughner. As we move into the meat of the show, I want to talk about our facility plan that we touched on last time and get more in depth. With facilities, I know in the past, Mr. Laughner, we were talking about having a 3-year and a 5-year plan. Now we're at a 5-year plan. Talk about the genesis of the plan, where the thought process came from, and how you all decided this is the way we need to go. Let's start from the beginning there. Where did the genesis of this come from?
Yeah, when I first came into the superintendent's role 2 years ago, there was a facility done in 2014. So we created a 5-year plan off of that. And many people may say, well, why are you changing your plan again? Well, the reason we're changing the plan and we're coming up with a new 5-year plan is we just completed a new facility study with Lancer plus BB, who are architects out of Indianapolis. Their study was actually concluded very similarly to the previous study in 2014. Okay, so we are basing everything off of that study, and we feel like there's some issues based off that study that we need to deal with right away. We feel like in the district there's some significant things that we need to address on some of our older buildings, whether it be HVAC systems or things of that nature. We also did some other studies to really paint a picture of what we could do and what we needed to do in certain areas of the district. Along with the facility study, we also did a demographic study that was presented to the board last October that showed the district is going to grow and showed where that growth would be. There's an expectation from that study that we'll get 600 to 800 new students over the next 10 years, in certain areas. We also did something called a policy analytics study. That study analyzes your property tax rate and your assessed value and where it's going to go over the next 10 years. Basically, it essentially tells you how much money you would be able to bond for over the next 10 years and even out to 20, 30 years to do these projects. So we've taken all that information and come up with a 5-year facilities plan. The one thing that also we included in this 5-year facility plan is we created a task force. We had about 63 facility task force members from the community. Each community was represented, Charlestown, New Washington, Jeffersonville, and also Clarksville. We met 5 times, and really 3 times where we looked at the study real deeply. And that task force made recommendations on what we should focus on first. And so we used all that information from the studies, the information that we gathered from the task force, and we created this 5-year facility plan, which I will be sharing with the community over the next month.
From initially when we talked about going back a couple of years with the 3-year plan and now COVID stepping into play, How does that affect the plan from your initial time to now? What are some of the big things that you've had to adjust on the timeline?
Well, one thing that immediately comes to mind is HVAC. You know, the facility study. Also, we had another mechanical analysis study done of all of our HVAC equipment across the district. And both those studies said that we needed somewhere around $35 million worth of HVAC work done on our schools. Now, obviously, we can't do all that in 1 year. We're going to have to spread that out over the 5-year plan. But that's certainly one, because you know, that goes to air quality within our schools, learning environment, and things of that nature. It also will make our buildings more efficient, you know, which does save you on your utility costs. You know, but really it goes to air quality and making sure that our students have and staff have a healthy climate to work in.
Let's start with the part when you look at building and how it adds to school. I know a big point of yours has always been we want to add kids to the school system. We talked earlier, 3,000 more kids in here than before with COVID, and we've added kids as well to the school system. How does it help building new facilities along with updating your HVAC and everything in between that makes it more reachable to parents to say, hey, Greater Clark is the place to go? How does that add value to them to bring students in?
Yeah. Well, you start with academics always. I mean, you got to have sound, solid academic programs, good teachers in your buildings that are preparing students to be college career ready. But buildings play a big role in that. You know, the learning environment, the lighting, the air quality are all very important factors. You know, and just the size of a room, you know, and the space of a room are important factors. And we have some very old buildings that are 60, 65 years old that you know aren't up to standard in some of those areas in terms of space, lighting, HVAC, air quality, those type of things that we want to fix and take care of. As far as the outdoor facilities, extracurricular facilities, and this is one thing the task force was very adamant about, is they wanted us to address the extracurricular facilities, whether it be a baseball, softball field, or an auditorium, or a swimming pool, because those are an integral part of the school experience. You know, and they also draw people to your community. You know, and if you have nice facilities, when people are driving around looking for where they want to take their child, they're going to look at your outdoor facilities first. They may not even be able to get into your building before they make a decision. And the only thing they see are the outdoor facilities. So you want them to be nice. You want them to be modern. We're not going to go overboard, but we want them to be nice and up to date, you know, and modern.
For the plan, let's start with year one. When does it start, the building, and what gets done in year one? We'll work our way through years 1 through 5 and kind of the process.
Yeah, year one would start almost immediately. I have 3 community meetings on August 17th, 18th, and 19th where I'll present the plan to the community. Then from there, we will take our recommendations to the board shortly thereafter on what we want to do in the first year. We have to do a hearing with the board. Once the board passes that hearing, then we have to set up, you know, when we will sell the bonds to finance this first year of projects. You know, the time line on that is, you know, September we'll probably do the hearing. The bonds would probably be sold in early November, and the projects would start probably in February, March of next year. You know, as soon as the weather cleared, especially on the outdoor projects. You know, so it's a pretty, you know, quick turnaround, quick timeline, but we feel like we need to get started on this work and get busy doing it.
What are some of the major highlights in year 1 and 2 for the plans, projects and buildings that looking to start construction for and hope to get done within the next couple of years?
Well, you know, first let me talk to you about the findings. The task force was great about really really narrowing in on what we need to do as a district. And their findings that they came up with, and I'm not doing these in any priority order, but the things that they wanted us to focus on was safety, security, roof repair and or replacements, HVAC systems, paving throughout the district, extracurricular facilities, you know, in terms of what we just talked about. They wanted us to focus on building 2 new elementaries in the district, one in Jeffersonville, one in Charlestown. They also wanted us to focus on building a new middle school that would replace Parkview Middle School. and also update playground equipment and make it equal for every school. You know, that was just the general findings of what the task force wanted us to focus on. Now, we, you know, synthesized that down into, all right, what out of those things do we want to do in year one? So what we want to do in year one is build new classrooms and pre-K space on at Riverside. And a lot of people will say, well, why do you want to do that? You just closed Bridgepoint, you had space there. Well, we have space for the Bridgepoint students at Riverside, North Haven, and Franklin Square. We want to make sure that we have a little extra space for any growth that Jeffersonville gets in this area up on the northern end. But also, more importantly, we want to make sure that we have pre-K space for our students. We're trying to really build our pre-K programming in Greater Clark. We're up to almost 300 students in our pre-K programs, and we want to get up to over 400 over the next 2 years. You know, so that's we want to build 6 classrooms on at Riverside there. This first year, we want to do district paving. You know, $1 million worth of paving throughout the district. If you've driven in our parking lots, you know that we have some issues that we need to take care of. District-wide HVAC updates. We want to spend $8 million on updating our HVAC and really get ahead of that. We also want to look at security and do some updates with our access controls, security cameras, and things of that nature. Here at Jeffersonville High School, we want to build new tennis courts. We want to move the tennis courts where they currently are out behind the baseball field by the soccer stadium out there, soccer field. We want to build something very similar to what Charlestown has up there in terms of Jeff will have more courts in a building very similar to what they have now, but we want to move those out there and update them. If you look at Jeff High's tennis courts, there's cracks all over them. They've been refurbished or resurfaced several times, and we just think it's time to move them and get them over there. It also will give us more room to do the locker room project here on the 5 courts closest to the football field. River Valley, we want to do some renovation work. As you know, we closed the pool down over there. We want to create classroom spaces in that area. Right now, if I had to say what that would be, it would probably be a STEM lab, so that we could get into more STEM programming over there, and some, you know, STEM labs and maker space, maker mobile spaces, things like that. Charlestown Middle School, we want to renovate some areas out there in terms of bathrooms, and also their industrial tech area and choir and band area. A good example of what we need to do out there in their choir and band area, they still have carpet from the 1970s. That needs to be replaced. That wasn't replaced in the last renovation done. They also still have bathrooms that haven't been touched since the original building was built. So we need to do some of those type of renovations. Also, one thing that we want to do, because we have significant water issues up at Charlestown, but we want to go ahead and do it here at Jeff, is we want to turf the softball fields at Jeff and Charlestown. We also want to turf the baseball field at Charlestown, just like Jeff High's is. And then at New Washington, we want to invest in their outdoor facilities also. You know, their baseball field, softball field, their track needs resurfaced, their tennis courts need resurfaced, things of that nature out there. So we're trying to make sure we do something for each community and each school and get a lot of things done. You know, and a couple other things. You know, we want to do some more classrooms at North Haven. Once again, we have space there, but we want to make sure we have extra space for the future, and we want to make sure we have more pre-K space for students. You know, pre-K classrooms have to have bathrooms. You know, and that's one of those things that people don't know. So, you know, when we build these classrooms on, we're going to make sure they have bathrooms so that we can have more pre-K students. And then finally, you know, in year one, we want to set aside some money to purchase land. We believe that with all the growth between Jeffersonville and Charlestown, and both facility studies cited this, is that we will need to build a new elementary school sometime down the road, maybe 8, 10, 12 years from now. I probably won't be the superintendent at that point, but we need to purchase some land somewhere in between Jeffersonville and Charlestown so that we have that land to build on a new elementary or a new middle school if needed because of the growth in between Jeffersonville and Charlestown. If you've driven out that way, they're building houses, at a very fast rate, and so we want to make sure we're prepared for that as a district, 8, 9, 10 years from now.
Now, I know those are year one highlights. We'll get into years 2 through 5 on a later episode because I know there's so many different details to go over. I wanted to touch on this. One of the things that was brought up with the community task force, how do you put together a community task force? What's the process of that? I know people are obviously, you mentioned community meetings, and we'll mention those again in a second, but how do you bring together a task force, and what do they provide to you in helping with this process?
Well, it started with myself and the executive cabinet at the administration building, and also the school board. Basically, we came up with a list of about 110 names of who are those community members that are engaged with Greater Clark, that want to be involved in what we do in Greater Clark. And so we identified those 110 people, and then we started sending out invitations that, hey, we want you to be part of this. We want your feedback on this. We know you're, important member of the community that wants to be involved and wants to see Greater Clark be progressive and move forward. And so we sent out invitations. We hoped that all 100 would attend. We ended up with 63, which is really still a good number for a task force like that. And then we had a facilitator come in who led the process. I didn't lead the process. No one on my executive cabinet team led the process. It was an objective, unbiased facilitator who led us through it and came up with these findings that I shared with you earlier. And so it was really, sometimes people think that a process or a task force like that is everything's already predetermined and already set up, and it's just sort of formality that you go through. And this was not the case. I mean, we got excellent feedback from those people in the community that were on the task force, and we listened to them.
For you, and I'll end with this before we finish up with talking about the community meetings, dates, and times. I think people see the big numbers, look at school buildings, and they think, oh, this is going to cost us a ton of money. We went over tax rate last time, but I wanted to have you talk for a second about, and I've mentioned this a few times, the efficiency. How much more efficient does it make it? I know older schools compared to newer schools, a lot of times it's cheaper to build a new school than to redo an old school. Yeah. You have better classroom sizes, more opportunities for students and teachers. How big of a part of that plan goes into the 5-year plan is making it more efficient and saving money, whereas people look at it on the surface and say, oh, this is going to cost us money. It's going to save us money in the long run.
Good point. First of all, going back to the tax rate, and I want to reiterate that we can do these projects and keep the tax rate at $1.10 where it currently sits. The reason we can do that is because our assessed value in this district is going up substantially. Last year it went up over 8%. The year before that went up over 5%. With all the building that's going on, we feel like it'll continue to go up in that 5 to 8% range. In terms of efficiencies, you're talking about a couple of different things there. Number one, when you replace an old building with a new building, the building envelope is tighter. You have better efficiency in terms of windows and just heating and air conditioning, which reduces your utility costs, which takes less money out of your operations fund. So that piece alone is big. I mean, Greater Clark, our utility bill each year is about $2.5 million a year in utility costs. If you can cut into that, well, that's more money that can go to the classroom. So it's very hard to be efficient with a 60-year-old building. And so that's what we're looking at. The other efficiencies you get when you merge buildings or build new buildings is you get efficiencies with transportation, food service, staffing, and all those things help you with your education fund and operations fund. And once again, if you're being more efficient with your financial resources, you can then build up your education fund and operations fund, and you can redirect more of that money to the classroom, to students and teachers. And that's what we're about. That's what we want to do. And that's what guided us in this 5-year facility plan. Now, in terms of renovation cost, I'll give you an example, and I think I've talked about this before. We would like to build a new elementary on the Wilson property, where Wilson Elementary currently sits. To renovate, and we would like to merge Thomas Jefferson Elementary and Wilson Elementary into that one large elementary school, which creates those efficiencies we just talked about. To renovate Wilson Elementary, it would cost around $14 million. To renovate TJ Elementary, a new total renovation, it would also cost about $14 million. So to renovate just those two elementaries, you're talking about anywhere from $28 to $30 million. Well, you can build a brand new state-of-the-art elementary for between $25 and $30 million. That is also 60% off the grid, with solar and things like that, geothermal. So that's what we're looking at, and I'm not even going into how much of a better learning environment that will be in terms of a new building with better lighting, better, classroom size, bigger cafeteria, bigger gym, those type of things.
Last thing we'll wrap up with here, community meetings. I know you've brought it up a few times. I believe August 17th, 18th, 19th. Any more information there? And I guess the question I want to ask you is, you've mentioned before that you've taken a lot of suggestions from these meetings and used them into your plan. What type of suggestions, questions, anything can people provide that you would appreciate or the cabinet would appreciate to help for information with the plan?
Well, we want to know what their concerns are about the plan. It was put out there during a work session. What concerns do they have? Are they concerned about the financial part of it in terms of the tax rate? Are we trying to pull a fast one on them? No, we're not. We're committed as a district and as a school board to keeping the tax rate at $1.10. And so we want to know what are their concerns. What would cause them not to support this? They're tax neutral projects, so we would hope that people would support this because it's only going to help our district and help our kids and our staff. Whether we're going to put out a Q&A to the community in terms of question and answer on the website. We know some of those questions will be, well, if you build a larger school, is that going to increase class sizes? No, just because the school is larger does not mean class sizes will get bigger. Okay, the student-teacher ratio will stay the same. So any questions like that, will my child have to be on the bus longer if you merge TJ and Wilson into one new school, or JJ and Pleasant Ridge into one new school? There would be a very minimal increase on time on bus because if you look at just the distance TJ is from Wilson, it's less than 3 miles from TJ to Wilson. Same with Pleasant Ridge and JJ up in Charlestown. The distance between those schools are minimal. So we want people to attend those meetings. We want to know what your concerns are. We want to address those concerns and really answer questions about whatever it may be. Whether it's tax rate, assessed value, our bonding capacity, whatever they want to ask, we want to answer.
Appreciate you coming in. I know it's a lot to digest. They went over a ton. Lastly, anything, I know you mentioned at the top here talking about first couple of days of school, any message or any note you want to pass on to staff, students, members of the community?
No, I think, we've had a successful start to the school year. I visited 7 schools on the first day of school, and the thing that I noticed is the students were excited to be back, and so were the staff, and that was great to see as a superintendent, that people were excited to be in school, with their peers, and with their teachers, and we'll just build upon that. There's always things that we need to address, such as the transportation issues, and we will address them. We'll rectify them. We want to be responsive and fix them, and we will. And I just look forward to having a great year. We have a lot of great things going on in this district for students, and we want to continue that.
Well, we appreciate you coming in. We also appreciate, last week you wore the Jeff Red, now you got the Charlestown Blue. They're going to get on you. You got to get new Washington next week. Going one at a time.
Next week I'll have new wash gear on. I want to make sure we celebrate each of our 3 communities, and including Clarksville also with Parkwood over there. So I want to make sure that our communities are all recognized.
Well, that's fantastic. Appreciate you coming in, Mr. Laughner.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That is Mark Laughner, our superintendent of Greater Clark County Schools, with another edition of School Talk Today, a socially distanced production. We appreciate you all tuning in and listening in. You can check this show out on replay. We'll have it on cable 184 local, along with radio 98.5 FM, and on audio streaming with WJHI.com, and on social media. Video will be out there on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram through WJHI. For Mark Laughner and Lily Fondrisi, I'm Clay Abel saying so long today for School Talk. Thank you for tuning in. This is 98.5 WJHI LP Jeffersonville.